All right, so what I've got here is Stat Lab, my Stat Lab, some homework assignments, and I'm going to show you how to use StatCrunch, at least a couple of things, and you on your own should get in there and bump around and take a look and try these things out on your own. So first of all, I'm going to go to the section 2.2 homework and show you how you can do a histogram in StatCrunch. So I'm going to do a preview of the homework. Some of you, who's done the section 2.2 homework, by the way? Anybody? Okay, so you probably have seen some of this. So I'm going to skip ahead to problem number 12. Problem number 12. Now, when you've got a bunch of data like you see here, my Stat Lab will also give you the ability to see the data in a separate window. So you see this little icon right up here? Go ahead and click on that icon, and then you have this drop-down window. You can open this in StatCrunch. You can copy the table to the clipboard and paste it onto a Word document, for example. Or you can maybe export this data to Excel or some other sort of spreadsheet software. Now I'm going to go ahead and click on Make a Delimited copy right now. And that's going to copy the data to my clipboard, and then I can open up Excel, open up a blank workbook in Excel, and then go ahead and paste that data into any column I want, and then I can manipulate it from there. Okay. For example, I could sort it from smallest to largest, and then go from there and start counting the number of numbers within each of the intervals that I create and so forth. But I'm going to go ahead and delete this Excel. Don't save. All right, because I want to focus back on StatCrunch. Now, I'm going to click on Open in StatCrunch. Now, StatCrunch is kind of embedded within my Stat Lab. And StatCrunch is going to open. It's going to have that same data in that first column. And the goal of this exercise is to create a histogram. Now look at these different menu options across the top. I'm going to go ahead and click on Graph because, after all, a histogram is a sort of graph, right? So it's pretty intuitive that that would be the selection that we should make. And then we can go on down here and select on histogram, huh? And then it'll ask you what column. Well, it'll be that first column, which is labeled VAR1. And then it might ask you, you know, well, when it says bins, that means the intervals. So you could start off, what is the smallest data value? Or so choose a number that is either at or a little bit less than the smallest data value. For us, it would be 0. But even if 0.1 was the smallest data value, you'd probably still want to start off at 0. And then the width of each interval, so use that same technique that we used last time to decide on the class width. I'm going to choose 0.1 as the class width for this exercise. And then you go on down to the bottom. You can fill in these other optional things if you really want to put in names and labels and stuff. And then you can export that scatterplot to some document that you're working on. I just want to look at the histogram right now, so I'm going to click on Compute. And there's the histogram. Okay. Of course, you can go back in and edit by selecting options and edit. Suppose that you want the width to be 0.2, for example, then you can change that there. and compute. Whatever. Okay. Any questions about using MyStatLab to do a histogram? That's pretty straightforward, right? So use it to your advantage. The software comes embedded within MyStatLab. So you paid for it, so go ahead and use it. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. I'm going to go ahead and close this section 2.2, and I'm going to go forward into section 2.4 homework, so we could look at doing some graphs and stuff. And I'm going to actually concentrate on doing a scatter plot. So this is going to be problem number 2 in the section 2.4 homework. And then you have to click this link right here to get to the data. And actually we have 2 columns of data. We've got president's heights versus the opponent's heights. And we want to know, is there a relationship between, okay, so you've got the president who's coming up to the end of his first term, he's going up against a challenger. So is there a relationship between the president's height versus his competitor's height? So this is data that's been collected throughout the years. Let's go ahead and click on this link and select Open in StatCrunch again. And now you're going to see the 2 columns of data here. And we could just simply go up to Graph and Scatterplot. And then you could choose maybe the opponent's height for the X variable and the president's height for the Y variable, or vice versa. And then select on Compute. And then voila, you got your scatter plot. Okay. By the way, do you see any sort of trend between those 2 variables? The answer is probably not so much. All right. We'll talk more about correlation later in the semester. Okay. But now you know how to do a scatter plot. And I'm going to kind of go back into the graph menu and show you can do other things as well in here, and let this be a kind of a starting point for you. You could do bar plots, pie charts if you want, histograms, box plots. We'll talk more about box plots later. I think that's next week or so. Stem and leaf plots. Let's go ahead and do a stem and leaf plot. You all know what a stem and leaf plot. We talked about that. So go ahead and select a column to do a stem and leaf plot. And there it is. Nice, huh? Graph. We talked about normal quantile plots, didn't we? Otherwise known as a QQ plot. And you do this to see if your data set came from a normal distribution. So do you have normally distributed data? Well, click on the QQ plot and select your column of data and click on Compute. And then you see a straight line, and you're looking to see whether you have the data randomly assorted above and below this line, instead of there being a pattern. And I would argue that there's actually a bit of a pattern to this data. So I would argue that this data isn't very normal in nature. Okay. So everybody understands how to do a normal quantile plot now, QQ plot? Okay. So what else? All right. So that's it for now for stat plot. I certainly encourage you on your own when you're doing your homework to don't be bashful about opening that data set and in StatCrunch and using StatCrunch to your greatest ability. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and show you now your graphing calculator. If you want to pull out your TI-84 calculator, TI-83 calculator. I'm going to show you how to do some things on your graphing calculator. We'll have many more of these sessions. But I've got my graphing calculator here as well. It's an emulator I've got installed on my computer. So, all right, you ready to go? TI-84 calculator. So I've got the blank home screen. You don't need for it to be blank, but anyway, so we're going to input some data. Now, what data? Well, it's going to be actually the same data for the president's height versus the opponent's height. I'm going to input this data. We've got two variables of data, two variable columns of data. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Input that data into your calculator. So your calculator, when handling data, puts data into lists. Now we're going to edit two lists by going into the statistics menu. So click on Stat. And then under the Stat menu, you've got Edit, Calculate, and Test. Now within the Edit submenu, we will select option number 1, Edit. So you could either press 1 or just hit Enter. And then what I want you to do, I'm going to give you a couple minutes to do this. Now under list L1 and L2, you're going to input this height data. So put the president's height in for list L1, which is that left list, and input the opponent's height into that second list L2. Now, if you have already got a bunch of stuff already in these lists and you want to clear it out, then all you need to do is just up arrow into the column header and hit clear, and then arrow back down, and you can clear out that list. But because I like to be efficient, I'm not going to redo this myself. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes to input that data, and then I'll show you how to do a scatter plot and some other stuff on your calculator, okay? So go ahead, I'll give you 2 minutes to input that data. Go ahead, and if you don't have a graphing calculator, then look on with someone who does, okay? Look on with a neighbor, because I hate for you to just sit there and, so maybe behind you or whatever. So get together with someone who's got a graphing calculator so you can see. Oh. So all you need to do is just type in the number and hit enter, and that will go through and input that number.
Did you quote the list?
Yeah, the list.
Say again?
The list.
Oh, absolutely. Oh yeah, it's also in data set number 12 in Appendix B in the back of your textbook. Yeah, so on page 798 of your textbook, this data is there as well. So who's using a graphing calculator that's like brand spanking new, fresh out of the package? Anybody? Have you ever used it before?
We had some back in my high school.
Okay, so you're somewhat familiar with it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right. Now, who is like absolutely brand new to using the graphing calculator? Anybody? Okay. All right. So if you get lost with anything, please let me know and I'll try to explain. So you're good. Oh, you got a TI 89. Well, hey, that's good. No, we can do everything that you want to do. All right. So, stat, edit, and then the president's heights, and for this L1. So you just put 191, enter, 172,
And they would.
so I think they have to use the matrix menu. Are you guys good? Okay. So we're just going to pause another minute or so to make sure everybody has a chance to get this input. So those of you without a graphing calculator, I'm not telling you have to get a graphing calculator. I just strongly encourage it. It's an investment that will pay off in the future anyway. Because your future classes will involve, well, some of your future classes will involve math of some kind. So you'll be happy to have a graphing calculator. So now's a good time to start learning how to use it if you don't know so already. Okay. All right. Okay, good?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and go forward in showing you what you could do with this data. Now, go ahead and hit quit by going second and then hitting this button here. And then do you see up here in the upper left on this button here, you in blue letters you see StatPlot, but you have to use the second button in order to access it. Go into your StatPlot menu and then you select on, you could have several StatPlots going on at the same time. We're just going to do number 1 StatPlot, so go ahead and select number 1 there. Now, we're going to turn it on, so if it's off, you would be seeing that. So left arrow, and then hit enter to turn it on. Now your cursor will be blinking on and off on the on button. And now down here, for the type, we're going to select that first one, and by default, it's almost always there anyway. That's going to be your scatter plot. The second one would be a line graph. The third one would be a histogram. We'll come back and do the histogram a little bit later. And then down here for X list, by default, it's going to be a list L1, which is where you put the president's height. And then the Y list will be the opponent's height. Now, if you need to change this list, you put your X variable data into some other list, then you can locate those list names by going down here. So if, for example, you put your X value data into list L3, then you could hit second and maybe L3 right there or whatever. All right, but I'm going to switch that back to L1. There we go. Enter. And then finally, on the bottom, you've got these markers. You got 3 different markers that you could use. So if you like, a small little dot or a medium dot or the large Cheerio dot there, you can make your choice. I'm going to go with the larger Cheerio dot. All right. Now, the next thing that we need to do is set our viewing window, the left and right limits and the north and south limits, so to speak. Now, the left and right limits is going to be the X minimum and X maximum. Now, how you choose the X minimum, X maximums, you look at your X variable data, which we've got stored in L1 list. And, let's take a look at our data here, president's height, and you look at the range of values for president's height. The smallest height appears to be, 168. And we want our X minimum to be a little bit less than that. So that's why we've got X minimum to be 165, a nice round number. And likewise, we want X maximum to be a little bit larger than the largest data value. And the largest data value, the largest height, I think is 193. So I've got the X maximum to be 195. And then you want there to be between about 5 to 10 tick marks. So you look at the difference between X minimum and X maximum, which in our case is 30. 30 divided by 10 is 3, so bump that up to 5. So that will give us 6 tick marks, right? 30 divided by 5 is 6. Okay, so that's a reasonable amount. And then you go through the same process for the Y minimum, Y maximum. Now I'm going to change mine. The smallest opponent's height looks to be 191. Oh no, 182, 181, 170. Oh shoot. Is there a 169? Yeah, there is. Okay, so we'll make that 165 for a Y minimum. Maybe 160. How about 160? Because we want it to be a little bit less than that smallest data value. And then we can make the Y maximum a little bit larger than the highest. So I see a 195. Is there anything larger than 195? No. So we can make that 200 actually. And with tick marks every 5 units. Okay. And now we've got an appropriate window set for left and right limits, top and bottom limits, and then select graph, which is this button right here. And then voila, you got your scatter plot here. And you're looking to see if there are any sort of trend between presidential height and the opponent's height. Probably not, huh? All right, is everybody tracking with me so far? Any questions so far about how to do a scatter plot? Now take the time to make sure that you go in these steps that I showed you, because if you don't set your window correctly, then you're not going to see your scatter plot reasonably well. All right, as far as a histogram goes, go back into your stat plot if you want to see a histogram of some data. Go back in your stat plot and go ahead and plot number 1 again. And we're going to still keep it on, but down in the type, we're going to right arrow over to that last type. And notice that it only asks you for 1 column of data, which we can have that be the presidential height data, L1. Now the frequency, leave that at 1, but if you're dealing with group data, like for example the frequency distributions and stuff, L1 would be the midpoint value and maybe L2 would be the frequencies for each of those midpoints. That's not what we're doing here. We're just going to use some raw data located in list L1. All right, so go ahead and go to your window. Now, the X minimum, X maximum is still going to be the same because we're using L1 as our X variable. But for the histogram, the Y variable range is going to actually be count or frequencies or whatever you want to call them. Starting off at 0 for the Y minimum, and I didn't see any heights that have more than about 6 or 7 counts. So I'm going to say Y maximum of 6, maybe with a tick mark every 1 unit. So Y scale, enter. and then go ahead and hit enter, or graph, I mean. And so there's a nice histogram for the heights. Now, if you don't like the width of those bars and you want to change the width of those bars, go back into your window menu, and you see where it says X scale. The X scale gives the widths of each of those rectangular bars 5 units. But if you don't want it to be 5 and maybe you want it to be 3 or something, then change that X scale to be a number that you want. I'm going to set it to 3 and then hit graph. So you can see that changes the width of those columns. Or if you want fatter columns, then you can go to the window and set your X scale to be something else, like 7. Gives it a slightly different appearance. Huh? All right. What else do you want me to show you? Any questions about using the graphic calculator for scatter plots? That's the big thing that you need to know. Or histograms. Any questions about StatCrunch and how to do anything on it? Now, just my last word is that if you want to know how to do anything on any of these platforms, whether it's Excel, graphing calculator like the TI-84 or TI-83 or TI-89, or on StatCrunch, all you need to do is just go on to Google. There's lots of resources. So if you want to know how to do a histogram on Excel, input that as a search term and hit enter, and you're going to have a ton of resources, including videos of people who've already done that. Or how to do a Pareto chart in StatCrunch or whatever. Okay? It's all been done before. Those resources are out there. People could tell you how to do it. And plus I can too. So if you get stuck at any time over the weekend or any other time, send me an email and I can send you a link or something. Okay? All right. So I'm going to let you go now. It's a little early. Have a good Labor Day weekend. No class on Monday. So please don't come to campus on Monday because I'm not going to be here. And only security is going to be here on Monday. And maybe IT. So I'll see you on Tuesday. So drive safe. Practice good boating safety. Wear your seatbelt. Don't drink and drive. Have a good week. Oh, I better end the video, shouldn't I? Stop.